Hello and welcome to Distraction. I'm your host, Dr. Ned Hallowell. Today we have part 2 of our 2-part series on ADHD. We invited my friend and colleague, John Ratey, to answer your questions about ADHD. It's a popular topic, and we wanted to make sure we address everyone's questions. Okay, Alan, you're now on the air with Ned Hallowell and John Ratey.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking the call.
Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, the question I had for you, especially either one of you, but maybe for Dr. Hallowell, reading your books, you talk a lot about comorbid conditions along with ADHD. And a question I had for you is somebody that was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD or ADD as an adult, and they also have the comorbid condition of anxiety. Could some of that anxiety actually be left over from labels or other things put on you as a kid because you weren't aware that you had this condition and you just were trying to get by, and so you just kind of rolled with whatever anybody told you, that you were, and therefore and you just wanted to try to get by and not disappoint people, and that's continued into your adult life, and as pressures increase and so forth, the anxiety increases. So do you believe that some of that could be left over from when, as a kid, just trying to deal with life and not really having your true personality pop out?
Oh, sure. I mean, in fact, most children with ADD feel anxious. Now, a lot of the time, in fact, I'd say the majority of the time, both what is regarded as anxiety and depression occur in the wake of untreated ADD. In other words, if you never know what you're going to forget, what you're going to overlook, what mistake you're going to make, that makes you anxious. And if you're underachieving, if you know you could be doing better than your grades performance record reflects, that's a bummer. It's not real depression, but it can look like that. So very often, once the ADD gets treated, once you get on medication and you can focus, you're more in control, so you feel less anxious, and your performance improves. So what looked like depression disappears. That's a very common scenario. Now, for some people, the damage was pretty bad, and they got subject to a lot of punishments, corrections, ridicule, and people with ADD tend to be very sensitive. And so they may have internalized that to the point that they develop a genuine lifelong problem with anxiety. And so what you're describing may be that. But don't despair. We have really good treatments for anxiety, some involving medication, many involving no medication whatsoever. So let John take it from there.
Right. The way I explain it, too, to help people think about attention and anxiety, because they often go together so much. I like to think of it from an evolutionary perspective because it helps some people sort of get it. And that is, if we were anxious at one point in our evolution, or we were inattentive, when we were inattentive in our evolutionary past, we better be anxious because we had to be ready to react and prepare not only to gather food, but also to be safe. And I think that's one of the ways I see a big intersection, because people often confuse them, and you really do. Most people do have anxiety with their ADD because, just what Ned said, you're uncertain when you're going to blow it, when you're not going to be attentive enough. And so you're always watchful. Then as you say, this person was perhaps over-criticized and blaming themselves, and then they internalize a feeling of them being failures and not good enough, and they're always looking to be better.
That's great. Actually, that's really good information. Can I have a quick follow-up as far as maybe on medications then to ask you about that?
Sure.
So one of the things that I noticed is I was given SSRIs and other short-acting medications for anxiety that really didn't help, and sometimes actually they made it worse. And when I started taking the stimulant, recently when I was diagnosed with ADD, that worked really well during the time the stimulant worked, but then the anxiety would come back, heavily at that point in time. And so I guess the question I have for you is if, those SSRI type drugs don't really work, or medications. And before, when I had inattentive ADD, I have a problem sometimes, when I'm not paying attention, falling asleep. Does a non-stimulant medication, does that make sense? And what about medications such as propranolol or atenolol or something like that? Make sense?
Well, I've done a lot of work with the beta blockers, atenolol and nadolol and propranolol. And they can be very useful for generalized anxiety, and especially sort of the low levels of it, and really help. I often use it in my patients with ADD and performance anxiety and anxiety in general, because it's a very safe medicine. You can use smaller doses and gradually ramp it up a little bit, and you can even use doses that stay in the body, like you mentioned, atenolol, or my favorite is nadolol over atenolol, but it doesn't even get into the brain, so it doesn't have any negative effect on the brain. But, the long-acting SSRIs sometimes can be useful, like if somebody tried with you, and then obviously you were talking about the benzodiazepines for short-acting, which can be useful and should be used, but they can also make you duller, which is what a lot of people with ADD really dislike.
Exactly. And that's what I was feeling with the short-acting ones, was what my wife described as me having a wet blanket over me. What about the non-stimulant medications for ADHD for somebody that has, inattentive? And like I said, one of the things wasn't hyper. In fact, it was the other way around. Sometimes, like I said, I'd have a tendency to actually fall asleep in meetings and so forth. Do those make sense, or the stimulants make more sense?
Well, I think John and I would both say the stimulants are the gold standard. But when it comes to psychopharm, whatever works is the best medication. So,
okay.
There are people for whom Wellbutrin is perfect. There are even some people for whom Strattera is just wonderful. Not that many, but there are some. And the guanfacine and that. But in general, the stimulants remain the gold standard. And the trick, I think, the mistake that happens too often is doctors who are not really conversant with stimulants, they don't really fine-tune it enough, so the person gives up either due to lack of benefit or presence of side effects or both. Would you agree with that, John?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I do think you need to have someone who knows how to turn the drugs correctly so you get the ultimate benefit, the maximum benefit.
And let me make a quick pitch for a non-medication treatment for anxiety. There's a new device out called Alpha Stim, the Greek letter alpha followed by the word stim for stimulation. And it's a really amazing little gizmo that you put these little clamps on your earlobes, and you just sit there for 20 minutes. You can be reading a book or staring out the window or whatever you want to be doing, and it sends a very low-level stimulation to your brain, changing your brainwaves. And you think that sounds bizarre. Well, it's actually got FDA approval with an indication for the treatment of anxiety. And I've tried it myself, and I think it's a remarkable tool, Alpha Stim.
Okay, great. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. And then, of course, my favorite treatment of all for anxiety is a human relationship. So, and as John's teacher and my teacher used to tell us, never worry alone. So, find the right people to share your concerns with, and the next thing you know, they disappear.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you for calling in.
Okay.
It was a very good call.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rachel, welcome to Distraction. You're on the line with John Ratey and Ned Hallowell.
Well, thank you. This is very exciting.
So how can we help you, Rachel?
My specific concern, this time anyway, was about ADHD and anxiety and the way that they interact. And then on top of that, because this is an issue for both of my kids, slow processing speed or relatively slow processing speed relative to everything else. Because anxiety and slow processing speed are big issues in my house.
First of all, you have to be sure that the medication is adequate for slow processing speed, for sure. And it also should help with anxiety when the attention system is working the best. So are there other factors involved with the anxiety, or is that just part of your children's nature? Are they feeling overwhelmed and criticized and underperforming and feeling bad about that kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the anxiety, there's a lot of stress with being in a high-performing school system and in high school, and everyone talks about college, and then things are harder when your processing speed makes it more difficult to write is the specific problem that actually both of my children have.
Oh, you mean putting together a paper and things like that? Or?
Exactly. Yeah. So they end up feeling like they're dumb, which they're not. And
yes.
I didn't even know there was actually medicine that would help with slow processing speed.
The medicine for ADD, making sure that they're on adequate doses, because that's sometimes the problem. I'm not saying that's going to be the answer, but that's sometimes the problem. Another thing about, usually the biggest problem, oftentimes people have a hard time putting together papers and worrying about structure and worrying about sequencing and worrying about getting it all down and saying it correctly. And there's a piece of software that is probably in its 10th iteration called Inspiration Software. You might want to look at that. They might want to look at that as something that they may want to play with, because it helps them use mind mapping, coming up with their ideas, coming up with their way of whatever they're trying to deconstruct or reconstruct in a paper, and then it sort of put it all together, and then you press a button and it gets into an outline very nicely. And people have been using it. Actually, two ADD people created it from the University of Michigan many years ago now to help them finish their PhD thesis, because so they put this together, this software package in it, and I've recommended it many times over the years with great success. Another thing that I recommend is taking a walk with a tape recorder to get their ideas down, at least, to get them started. But moving really activates the brain and helps. Actually, studies show that it makes us more creative while we're moving. And so that's another more recent. We've talked about it for a while, but we now have evidence that this might really promote the ability to come up with whatever they're struggling with.
Or failing that, just a quick burst of exercise before you sit down to write the paper. You can do that running in place, jumping jacks, push-ups, what have you, running up and down stairs. You can do it in 5 minutes. And like John says, it's like pushing the reset button on your brain. You get a whole new bath of neurochemicals that will help you focus.
I will suggest it. Thank you.
Sure.
And by the way, the exercise will also help lessen the anxiety. Yeah, it has many effects. So that's. But yes, those are the suggestions.
Okay, that sounds great. Now I just need to convince my kids that exercise is a good idea.
Well, make it fun. That's the key. Make it fun.
All right, I'll try.
All right. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Rob, welcome to our podcast, and you're on the line now with John Ratey and Ned Hallowell.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for calling in.
My question, and I listened to one of your podcasts, of course, and it was on distractions, which I think everybody is aware of now. And the one that I had written or called into your program about was, I'll just call her my lady friend, and we're in our 50s. We're too old to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You get to that age. And she is hyper aware of any danger, hyper aware of any accidents, hyper aware of just about everything. She can't sit and watch a TV show without also reading emails. She constantly has to have the TV show on to CNN, Fox News, and maybe something that I think are entertainment shows where My 600-Pound Life or Dr. Phil or something like that.
But and she's not watching that because she weighs 600 pounds, right?
No, she's she's 5 foot tall and 93 pounds.
Okay.
But it's where she can't. My thing is she can't sit and watch a TV show without compulsively reading junk email or searching a website. Where does that come from, and what do I do?
Well, this began as a joke. We talk about the crackberry, and it's anything but a joke. What makes it more difficult, the treatment for most addictions is the goal anyway, is abstinence. But that's not practical with electronics. They're necessary for living in today's world. So really, the analogy is with food. Everyone has to eat, but if you don't learn to eat in moderation, then you've got My 600-Pound Life. So it's not easy. Your girlfriend, lady friend, whatever we want to call her, she is wrestling with a true brain-based addiction. Now the good news is it's eminently treatable. And like with all addictions, it begins by acknowledging it and then getting support. And, the treatment is obvious. Turn it off. But that's easier said than done. John, you want to weigh in on this?
The world that we live in is just so invasive right now. And we get so driven by the next thing, the next piece of data, and we're all looking, and we can't sit still and enjoy together. I mean, this is what you're missing. You're missing her enjoying your TV program together, and she has to be streaming, and it is truly an addiction of the modern world. And people don't pay attention, and they don't feel, and you don't feel valued enough to have her participate with you, even if you're watching the 600-Pound Life for whatever reason. It's just something that deflects from any kind of connection you might have in terms of enjoying something together. And I think that's what you're feeling. And so that has to be acknowledged, and she has to take steps to curb that addiction, at least when she's with you. And
I've had some experience with people with alcohol or drug addictions, not myself, but people living close to me. And the way you describe it like that is when I would try to get in between their addiction, in between alcohol, for example, and try to cut them off with alcohol, I realized that the alcohol was more important to them than I was. And when I've tried to get between her and maybe asking her or turning off the TV myself, I felt like I was getting in between somebody and their addiction.
Well, you are.
Right.
And that's a good way to think of it. So, and then she has to begin to acknowledge that's what it is, truly an addiction. So, and that will maybe help her begin to deal with it. And that's what you can do. And that's what she can do.
And, driving this, I'm pretty sure, is a big load of anxiety. I mean, it sounds like she's just tremendously anxious. And so you might bring her to see a professional, and this is a time when medication could help, physical exercise could help, meditation could help, coaching could help. You want to have a multimodal approach to it, because the way you describe, it's beyond just the addiction. I mean, she's living in fear.
Right, and as far as she runs every day and she runs marathons. So
okay, so that's not going to.
No, what I was thinking was something more along the lines of I've done this a lot myself, and it helps me focus. So I did a lot of meditation, not a lot, but I did some, so I know how to meditate. I know how to focus my mind.
So do it with her.
She can't sit still. That's the point. She can't sit still and won't sit still, so that's the point I'm at.
Well, there's something called Kundalini Yoga, which is yoga while walking.
Okay.
And just Google Kundalini Yoga, Kundalini. And you can do that with her, and it's very vigorous, and you're essentially meditating while walking. Now, has she had her ADD treated?
No.
Oh, see, this is we're we're overlooking the obvious. Here, John and I are specialists, and we didn't ask the obvious question. Many people with addictions are basically self-medicating untreated ADD.
Okay.
So there's a darn good chance that a trial of a stimulant medication could make it a lot easier for her to give up her electronics.
Right. Instead of just me removing the TV or saying quit watching TV, which doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. You can't compel her. But if she got on stimulant medication and we saw the response we want, she wouldn't have the desire to compulsively watch TV.
And approaching, maybe this is out of your field of expertise, approaching somebody that they may have a mental illness is very difficult.
Yeah, you don't want to call it a mental illness.
Right.
Just name the symptom. The TV is getting in the way of our relationship. You don't bring in terms that you don't need to bring in.
Right.
Because that scares people away.
Right, and I can't make these assessments myself. I can only observe what I see and reflect back and then...
Right. Say, I love you and I'm losing you to the television.
Right.
Let's go see someone to help us.
Okay.
And then let that person make the diagnosis.
All right.
Okay. You really... How you frame it makes all the difference in the world. If you say to someone, you're crazy, you need help, they're not going to be up for getting help. But if you say, I love you and something's coming between us, let's go see if a professional can help us, they're much more likely to do it.
And I think in general the profession, the helping professions, mental health professions are really acutely aware of not only ADD but also the addicted side of our digital world. And so we're getting smarter. It's getting out there. It's getting in the news. It's getting people who are aware. And maybe she'll understand that this is a part of her makeup that she needs to do something about.
Right. And I've been trying to model behavior, what I do, if I watch TV, why I do, and I say, okay, I'm not watching this show, so I will turn it off. Or if there's a show on that I want to watch, a sporting event, I'll ask, can I watch this sporting event for this period of time? Is it okay?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Asking permission and modeling in that way rather than just turning it on and leaving the TV on and walking around.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you're very wise, and you always want to do it in the context of collaboration, not dictation.
Okay, I think you guys gave me some stuff I can work on.
Yeah, it's delicate, and you'll always have better luck if you have a team. So it's just not the two of you.
Right.
So bring in whoever she trusts, whoever, even a friend, or it's easier to do this as a team rather than just one-on-one.
If it ever got on Dr. Phil, she might pay attention to
it. And humor is another wonderful tool to use.
Yeah, all right. I'll try that, and I'll try it. I'm not a very delicate person, so I'll work on that.
All right.
Yeah, you have to practice. Write it out.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your call.
Okay, thanks for your help. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's our show, and this has been a very special show for me to have my wonderful friend and colleague John Ratey on, and I've enjoyed it so much that I'm going to try to persuade him to do this again and make it a regular feature of Distraction.
Oh, it was good. It was remembrance of things past, as we said, because we used to do this often and not often enough now. We're too busy. We're crazy busy, like you said.
Well, maybe now we found a forum that'll work for us.
Right. We could call in from anywhere.
Yeah.
So, I love connecting with you and connecting with these patients, and they really came in with great questions.
Yeah,
they were really super questions.
Yeah. We should add, they weren't patients, but they were...
individuals.
Right.
Okay, I'm used to using those terms. I'm sorry.
Right. If you liked hearing from John Ratey, please let us know that, because we want to do it again and again. And
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And all of you listening, have a wonderful day wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
If you're listening and you'd like us to take up a topic, as the callers did, please be in touch with us. Write us an email, call, or send us a tweet. Whether you're a first-time listener or have been with us since the beginning, please subscribe to Distraction on iTunes and leave us a review. It helps the show, and it helps us to keep going. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people.